Let's begin with the latest in the Occupy Wall Street movements going on around the country. This coming Thursday will mark 2 months since the movement began, since people have been camping out in parks, organizing protests, and demanding change to the economic and political system in America. Indeed, there have been changes made, namely a renewed focus on topics like the power of big banks and inequality in America. There's also been a bright spotlight shined on police brutality after police in many cities used tear gas, rubber bullets, batons, and riot gear to deal with many of the protesters, badly injuring a few of them. Now, over the weekend, police across the country swept through many of those camps, evicting protesters and arresting dozens of people. In Portland, Oregon, police encircled a camp where Occupy members have been staying and arrested about 50 people who did not comply with that eviction order. In St. Louis, Missouri, 27 people spent the night in jail after refusing to leave the park they've been staying in since October 1st. And in Salt Lake City, Utah, 19 people taken into custody Saturday after police issued an eviction notice and cleared out the park there. Now we'll look at Oakland, California. You know, over the last few weeks, we've seen police leave peaceful protesters in critical condition, then back off a little bit. Well, now they've returned, tearing down encampments and removing protesters one by one.
Something just doesn't sit right with me about this whole Occupy movement. Not that I don't think that the people on the ground are sincere and that they have valid concerns, because I think they are, and I share their concerns. I'm just worried about how the powers that be, the New World Order itself, will use the media and other groups to manipulate the public now participating in this movement to just go into the exact direction that they wanted them to go into all along. And so, as if I wasn't worried enough about this as it was, somebody brings this to my attention, this blog, La Alternativa, that says the Lucis Trust behind Occupy Wall Street. You have Occupy Wall Street and Occupy Vancouver and Occupy LA and all these different groups, but then you have the website for the global Occupy movement, which is 15thoctober.net. And someone looked up the who is on GoDaddy, who the domain name is registered to, and it turned out to be registered to one Paulina Arcos, whose address is given as 866 United Nations Plaza in New York. And when they looked into who Paulina Arcos was, they found that she's actually the wife of Francisco Carrion Mena, who is permanent representative of Ecuador and chairman of the special committee at the UN. So they figured, well, okay, so the UN is behind this, you know, surprise, surprise. But then, because they'd been reading some books on Freemasonry, they found out that 866 United Nations Plaza is actually the unofficial address of Lucis Trust. So here is the website of Lucis Trust, esotericism, meditation service, having a world goodwill seminar. And then when you click on Arcane School, what do you see? Training in New Age discipleship. And right there is the 5-pointed star, the sign of Satan, which is not really surprising to find on the Lucis Trust website. Lucis Trust, formerly known as Lucifer Trust, whose founder, Alice Bailey, was a disciple of Madame Blavatsky, who is a student of the occult who wrote a bunch of books, inspired Hitler, and served the devil. But is Lucis Trust really behind Occupy Wall Street?
Hello everyone, welcome to Global Government News. Today is Wednesday, November 16th, and I'm Darko. My website is ggnonline.com, ggnonline.com. Also on YouTube, it's ddarko2012. I have a Global Government News group on Facebook. You can check that out. Where all the headlines and links are posted in YouTube's video description. The first article we have up is Oakland Mayor Quan admits cities coordinated crackdown on Occupy movement. So remember I mentioned this on Monday about how this is being done unilaterally. That's the word I used. That means that this came from the top down. Just like this actual movement came from the top down, you just saw. Now the orders to shut it down are coming from the top down. So anybody says that things come from the grassroots, I hate to break it to them, but I don't think it's so. I don't think it's so for almost anything. You know, even when stuff gets violent or a little aggressive, you see it comes from the top down. It's provocateurs, it's police causing it. So we have here embattled Oakland mayor speaking in an interview with the BBC. Casually mentioned that she was on the conference call with leaders of 18 U.S. cities shortly before they broke up Occupy Wall Street encampments across the country. Quote, I was recently on a conference call with 18 cities across the country who had the same situation. She said she spoke with protesters in the city and who professed an interest in separating from anarchists, implying that her police action was helping this. Then she goes on and she says in New York City, it's interesting that Wall Street movement is actually on a private park, so they're not, again, in public domain, and they're actually not infringing on the public's right to use a public park. So they did these midnight or pre-dawn raids like cops usually do for terrorist suspects or drug suspects, the war on terror, the war on drugs. They do these pre-dawn raids, and so they did it all across the country, but it did it across the world too. I mean, this was in Australia, this was in England, and so yeah, I mean, you can go in there and you can check the actual thing. Court order allows demonstrators to return but not bring tents. That's because what is probably on private property. I'm assuming that's what the reasoning was. Tear gas, pepper spray, and sound cannon. Ooh, the sound cannon was used. Remember that was first used what the G8 or the G20 5 years ago. Protesters claim. It says here around 200 arrested, including some chained together. And then we come to find out, let me find this article here, that according to the UC police captain, linking arms to form a human chain is an act of violence, which is normally an act of protest, civil disobedience, pretty peaceful, but they're saying it's violent. It's violent and stuff like that. So But the sound cannons that there has been people that have had permanent hearing damage from that one in Pittsburgh, that summit, and they were trying to sue for it. And then you have the individual who almost got killed, the Marine in Occupy Oakland, who got shot in the head, and he just got released from the hospital. So, I mean, they're just as violent as well, you know. Okay, so we had this article over here. Here's the big risk. Occupy ends up doing the bidding of the global elite, which is what they're doing, right? Because I actually saw in one article, they actually referred to the movement as anti-capitalist. Although I don't think everybody in that group is anti-capitalist. I think a lot of them are just ticked off the way things are. And that, you know, like I've mentioned before, we are kind of just like we're hatched into this system where we kind of just live with it. And then if you don't go with it and you can't find a job, or you're a lazy piece of crap, and you know, you're lazy Generation X, you know. And this is what we have to deal with here. And then so now we don't have any retirement. We're going to have to work to 80 years old. We have to pay off debt, you know, for the past how many years we're going to have to pay in the future. Basically become even more debt slaves. So there's good reason for young people to go out and protest and stuff like that, but it is being co-opted. And it says, history shows us it's easy for grassroots campaigns to become co-opted by the very interests they are fighting against. Well, that actually happens almost 100% of the time. Moving on here, quarter laws. And of course, what is the ultimate goal here? It's to create a world central bank, which the Pope just recently called on for. And the Pope is actually in charge of Britain and the United States and Australia. That's actually who is the real president or the leader of Australia and the Kingdom and the United States, which is actually a part of the Kingdom, is the Pope. So he calls the shots. He called out for he wants a world central bank, and then you had also other leaders calling for a global Tobin tax. So an archbishop, I think, too. Court allows Occupy Wall Street protesters to return. Okay, we already covered that. Media arrested and harassed in Zuccotti Park. Sweep. Then Occupy London in cahoots with coppers, far from being enemies of the state. Says here, St. Paul occupiers are helping the police arrest political undesirables. Next up, only a totalitarian New World Order can save us now, says Naomi Klein. Moving down here, it says that the solution to climate change is punitive taxation, mass wealth redistribution, and the abolition of free trade. Okay, so state enforce end to the cult of shopping, so very communistic. And of course, what we had a member on the IPCC, whatever the heck they want to call themselves as a legitimate organization, actually came out and said that the point of climate change and that was to redistribute wealth. So we already know that's what it's for. Brazil irked over U.S. medical waste cargo, so Brazilian authorities have blasted the U.S. for exporting and selling medical waste, toxic waste to Latin America country as textile products. Says we want to identify all individuals who participate in this type of import in order to find out who has exported this material. Next up, we have weak regulation blamed in outages in New England. So it's not so much, you know, they blame weak regulation on outages, whereas if you actually had less regulation, people were able to get into this energy market, right? If there weren't so much government involved in it, you would actually have more competition. You'd have better services. But no, they want to make you think that you need more government to solve a problem that was caused by government. Heaven knows we're miserable now. And it says here, well-being measurements are not a luxury we can ill afford in a recession. It says they will help ensure we all emerge from a happier and healthier yeah. So successive governments have been concerned with the emotional well-being of the UK population. So it goes on here, it says 2010, Cameron announced the ONS would be developing a nation welfare well-being measure pressing ahead. So the state wants to know how the slaves are feeling as you know, basically their future is stolen and siphoned off by private interests, and how they feel about it, and to be happy about it. Employees afraid to ask bosses for time off. Well, I wonder why, because they're scared they're going to lose their job. It says a graying population reduces global warming. So it says here that you can help the environment by getting old. In other words, you can help the environment by dying. And it is interesting with these past articles, kind of tying them together, is that it was the Club of Rome that came up with the idea of human anthropogenic global warming. In other words, humans are the cause of climate change, right? To get them to believe that. Well, humans, like I said before, are responsible for climate change. They're spraying, but it's a very select few in planes. If there are actually humans spraying and not robots, and they're spraying, they're causing the climate change, but they want to have humans believe that it's them so they could feel guilty, so they can just die off and feel bad.